This is Darryl Plandowski. Welcome to the Shaun Newman podcast.
Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. Got a really, oh man, this was a lot of fun this week. Been trying to get Darryl on for, well, it's probably been 8 months. We've been chit-chatting back and forth and finally got him through Lloydminster, got him to sit in the studio, and just had a blast sitting down and talking with him. He is a guy who's been around the sport for a long time, and I just can't say thanks enough to him for stopping in. I want to give a shout-out to, first, Ken Rutherford Appraisals. They host the podcast, obviously, if you've listened to the podcast since the beginning. It's housed in Ken Rutherford Appraisal's office. We destroyed their storage room and turned it into the studio, so a huge shout-out to Ken. Without him, I'd probably be doing it out of my basement, and I guarantee it would not have the feel that this room continues to have. And as we, build on it, it just gets better and better. Secondly, Carly Clausen and his team at Windsor Plywood Lloydminster. They built the river table. I haven't been in the studio for what feels like a very long time. I obviously got back into it this week with Darryl. And the first thing I had to do when I got in was give the table a rub, because it is just, you walk in, it's just beautiful. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, head to my Instagram page or to Windsor Plywood Lloydminster's Instagram page and see some of the cool woodworking they're doing, the river tables, or other things, mantles, etc. They got everything there, custom wood. They're just fantastic at what they do. Now, here is your Factory Sports Tale of the Tape. This week on the podcast is Darryl Plandowski. He played for the Lloydminster Lancers back when they played in the SJHL. He holds the single-season record for most points by a Blazer, Lancer, or Bobcat with 121. He played in the NCAA for Norther Michigan University. He was their captain his final year. That year, they won the national championship. He scored a hat trick in that game. If you want to see something cool or listen to something cool, head to YouTube and check out the game-winning goal in triple overtime. It's unreal. After he did that, he heads to Seattle, where he was an assistant coach with the Thunderbirds of the WHL for 2 years. He then becomes their head scout for 4 years. And from there, he springboards to the Buffalo Sabres for 8 years, followed by the Pittsburgh Penguins for 2, and now he's been with the Tampa Bay Lightning since 2008. He's got quite the record behind him. So sit back, enjoy this one, folks, and without further ado. All right, welcome to the Shaun Newman podcast. Today I'm joined by Darryl Plandowski, assistant to the director?
Yeah, whatever that is. It's just a bunch of names, and it all changed last year when Steve left, so everybody got kind of a title.
Okay. So just call
Scout.
a scout of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah.
First off, thanks for doing this. I'm glad I could steal a little bit of time out of your, I'm sure, very hectic schedule.
Yeah, it's after Christmas it gets a little hectic where you're on the road a lot, but no, it's not a problem. I just visiting family and friends, so it's easy to drop by.
Where are you on your way to, or where are you coming from?
I'm coming from Saskatoon, and I have a day off, so I will be in PA the next couple nights watching, I think Swift Current and Brandon are there, so I need to see Brandon and Prince Albert.
Do I dare ask how many places you go in a month's time?
I bet you right now I probably 25 days a month on the road. So I can be, and the way we do it, we don't, I can be in Edmonton one night, Toronto the next night, and Moncton the following night. So money's not they don't worry about money. It's just make sure I'm at the right games. So we spend a lot of money, but we spend a lot of money at it.
Well, they got to get you to the right places, right?
Right, especially this time of year. It's the guys are winding down. There's probably 15 games left, so. Yeah. And then playoffs, and some guys aren't going to make playoffs, and you want to make sure you see the guys before if they ever get hurt, and you're kind of hooped. So it's it's full bore right now for most scouts right now.
And where do you call home then, Darryl?
Halifax.
So how often do you get home?
Not very often right now. Probably Well, I have a son playing in Charlottetown, and I have a son playing in Calgary. So I might, because of where they're situated, I'm probably home 2 days a month right now because I'm bouncing around between those two places also.
Does that ever get old?
Yeah, it starts to. Yeah, it starts to wear you out.
Because how many years you been a scout now in the NHL?
About 21, 22 years.
Holy moly.
They add up. Let's put it that way. They add up fast.
And I assume as fun as it is when you're a younger guy to hop from Edmonton to Toronto to Moncton to wherever else, eventually it's just an airport, right?
Yeah, that's all. It's a plane, and just get there on time and make sure you're on the plane. And usually I'm asleep before the plane takes off, and you land and you figure out where you're going. You jump in your car and away you go. That's the life right now.
You've learned how to sleep on a plane then.
Oh yeah, I can sleep on a plane. That's not a problem.
Well, I want to go back to when you were back actually playing. So for the listeners who don't know, and I should point out, I probably have walked by your Lancers jersey in the Civic Center here in Lloydminster, I don't know, 100 times, 1,000 times. I don't know how many times it's been. And it never really clicked until I had Warren Noble, a guy, suggest that I interview, and I was like, well, I see his jersey, but I've never actually thought long and hard to look it up because, I mean, I was born in '86, so you're 5 years away from winning a national championship at that time.
Yeah.
So I guess for the people who don't know, back you were saying just before we started this, you grew up in Lloydminster here.
Yep.
And then played your junior A for the Lloydminster Lancers, who once again are no longer a team and are no longer part of the SJHL, since been part of the AJHL. But I wonder if you wouldn't mind taking us back to the first year as a 15-year-old or 16-year-old, and what that was like.
Yeah, it was. Well, I was real small. I think I was 5'6", 135 pounds. I started when I was still 15 because I had a late birth date, so I was an October birth date. So I every day my mom had to drive me to practice and pick me up, and I didn't have a driver's license. It was good. I enjoyed it. It was hard because when you're small, you take some beatings, but we had good guys, and Jack Shoup was my first coach, and Jack didn't play me a lot my first 10 or 15 games, and then I started playing and producing a little bit, and it made me a better player the following year. I walked as a second year, 17-year-old kid. I think I scored 40 goals that year, and if I wouldn't have played as a 16-year-old, I don't think I would have had quite the success that the next year. So it was good. I enjoyed it. Your schooling takes a hit. If things take a hit, but it was worth it.
What was being a part of a brand new organization like? Is there anything that sticks out coming from back then? Because I mean, they were a part. What were we saying? 7-8 years a part of the SJHL.
Yeah.
You played in 4 of them.
Yeah.
Was there anything, a buzz around Lloyd back then about it?
I think everybody was excited because they'd finally gotten in Tier 2 hockey. So, we were. I think we were well attended. People were excited about the team, especially. I I went to a lot of the games the first year, and they weren't very good that year. We were okay the second year, and then we got better every year that I was there. But I think the town really, it was something new, so people were excited about it. It was people came to the game, 7, 800, maybe 1,000 people a game. Playoffs was a little more, but they always had decent teams, and part of it is we had decent guys, that were fun guys to be around. So, when you're playing a lot of teams, it's better the quality of the person, the more fun you have. And I had fun. I definitely had fun.
Were you on the ice right from a little hopper? Did you play different things growing up?
No, hockey was back then. There was no summer hockey. Now I'm involved in summer hockey and training and with my boys, but back then there was no. Once the rink was shut down, the rink was shut down for the whole summer. I lived on the farm, so you had your chores and you get the crop in and the harvest and stuff. So we played a little bit of ball in the summer, but not a lot. When I was a kid, it was pretty much just going to the lake on the weekends and doing stuff like that. It's changed now where it's probably a 10-month sport for kids even at 5, 6, 7. It's crazy the way it's gone, but it's like a ball rolling down a hill. It's just kind of, I don't know if it'll stop.
Yeah, it's almost crazy to watch. My kids are still under 4. I got 3 under 4, and the amount of hockey that's played now and the amount of training that goes into it and everything else, I assume that's, well, I mean, as a scout, you've got to watch that entirety evolve, I assume, right? I mean, the high levels always had some of that in there, but
yeah,
everything right from nutrition to training all through the summer, etc. You don't have to go back that far. And
it doesn't seem that far off, but it's, it's probably 20, 25 years. When I first started scouting, I was the scout of the Seattle Thunderbirds, and summer hockey was one tournament, and that was the big tournament in Vancouver. I think it was the Super Series. So teams from all over Western Canada. I think Alberta would bring a team, Saskatchewan would bring a team. There'd be teams from Alaska. And it was kind of your first chance to see the young kids coming up. And then I was there for 4 years, and by the end of that 4-year cycle, there's tournaments everywhere. They were starting up in Winnipeg and Saskatoon, and it was just like a circuit. And then you had the spring teams, and now it's it's a race to be on a spring team, and parents are spending $8,000-$10,000 in the summer or springtime going to tournaments and flying around. And that's the part that and I did it. I can't say that I didn't do it for my kids. We spent a lot of money and doing the same thing, and now I look back and it's hard to say that to tell people that it's kind of a waste of time and money, that they're better off doing what we're doing now in Halifax, and that's doing summer training where you're on the ice doing skills and skating and playing 3-on-3, and rather than spending thousands of dollars a week. For us in Halifax would be driving down to Boston or New York and flying. And so there's ways to do it and cut costs that seem sensible, but sometimes sensible doesn't make sense for a lot of people.
I can understand that. Yeah,
it's tough. And I'm lucky. I married a figure skater who now does all the power skating for all the professional AHL, NHL, Q players and college players from Halifax. So she has a business now that brings people from all the way from Ontario.
To Halifax.
Yeah, I think there'll be some kids from the Western League come out this year so she gets all the agents send her all their guys to train and fix their skating. And so we do a lot of skating for 12 weeks or so. I'm involved with it, but she's full time. We'll have half the ice will be skating, half the ice will be skill development, and then the last 20-25 minutes will be all 3-on-3 small area games. So we rent probably hour and a half segments, and then we train everything from the little guys to the high end guys. So I know she had Noah Dobson last year, and a few of those guys that are all in the National Hockey League that come to her just to become better skaters. So now that I've seen that end of what is out there, and people that spend all this money in spring hockey, and really it's really a waste of money that they could take their money and spend a fraction of that and be way better off. So I've as I get older, you learn, and when you're in the moment, you don't really think that that's the best way, and you want to get involved with the top guys, and I can understand that part. But as I look back now, as I get older and wiser, how I would have spent my money differently, and that's the avenue I'd promote now.
Yeah, is it developing the skills of the kid, which can be done on any ice surface, essentially.
Any ice surface. I mean, you can go to a normal practice or play a game, and you might touch the puck for 30 seconds, and then you can come to a skills camp where you're doing Power Edge Pro type of stuff, and you touch the puck for in an hour and a half, you probably touch it for 45 minutes. So rather than getting 4 or 5 touches in a game, you get 400 or 500 touches in a hour period. So it makes so much more sense when you explain that to people, that if they stop and think about it, they agree with it. And so that's why we get a lot of kids now and they still play spring hockey, but the influx of people from all over the Maritimes that come in to train and to touch pucks and to learn how to shoot better and skate better. And in the end, it's a big payoff for them.
That's been a common theme, that wording, touching the puck or puck touches. When did that start to change? Was that something that was adopted from? Well,
the Europeans, you watch what the Europeans are doing, and I think you're starting to see more and more coaches in Canada, especially Canada. Canada for years was lagging behind. We won World Juniors, but we thought it was more hard work. We were a hard work-based team, and the skilled teams were the Finns and the Swedes and the Russians, and even the Americans. They pour a lot of money and time into skill development, skating. In Canada, I think there's been a lag just because we've had all these, my opinion, these older coaches that don't think there's a lot of value to it. You know, if you're going to just dump and chase, who cares? But the game is now a puck possession game, so now you see all kinds of younger coaches taking over. And even in Major Junior, I know Portland Winterhawks, the Ottawa 67s, London Knights. There's a lot of skill development involved in those teams, where some days that's all they do. And Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. There's probably 4 or 5 teams in each league that it's a big part of their structure, and there's a big payoff for the players. And I think everybody's starting to see that now. And now you can go any rink in, let's pick Toronto, and they're all running those types of things. So Canada's skill is catching up to the rest of the world, and you can start to see that with some of the high end players. Kirby Doc from Saskatoon last year. Those guys are high end guys that can now walk right in the National Hockey League. We've had those guys all the way along, but now I think there's more. The average person is more of a skilled player than it was probably 15 years ago.
I would say easily.
Like, it used to be such a physical game, and you got to hit and hit to get the puck. Now it's filling lanes and having your stick in the right spot, and there's less hitting, but there's so now you have to have skill, and try and find Major Junior, college, everybody around the world, NHL, to find 6 skilled defensemen on a team is real tough to find. And that's why you see Finland and Sweden producing these players now, especially on the blue line, that they're coveted. We don't even care about their size. Size is kind of a secondary thing now. If you're 5'11" and you can add weight and you can be 185, 190 pounds, skate and pass the puck, you got a lot of value. It used to be the big guys that could maul you or get you in the corner.
You're talking to a 5'7" on a good day defenseman who came up through the era of we want big, strong.
So that's all changed. It's everybody does their numbers now on their draft. The numbers will say if you're not a first or second round with size, especially on the blue line, anything after that, you're better off not drafting anybody with size. You're better off drafting smaller 5'11", 6-foot defensemen that'll turn out and skate and pass the puck. And that's kind of the direction you can watch the whole league take, whether it's the Corey Krugs, all those little guys that now are valuable guys on their team.
How about you played junior A hockey? How about a guy like Makar coming straight out of junior A and being drafted like that? Are you starting to see more of that?
I don't know if we're starting to see more. I think there's lots of avenues for kids now. There's always an anomaly like that. Fabro was a couple of years before before Makar. He kept his eligibility and played in Penticton. There's always these guys in the States. There are, now they kind of accumulate them on their under 17 and under 18 team, that's their national team. In Canada, you still see a big swath of those kids go major junior. And mine was one of them. My son was 16 this year, and he's a defenseman. And it's a big Lambos in Winnipeg, and the Clark kid in Barrie. Like these guys they're smart enough now, and they skate well enough that they can handle. If they can get through the first 6 weeks, 2 months, they can really see the benefit of having them play at a high level where they have to really think and compete to survive. And just like what I went through when I was young, the payoff is your 17, 18, 19-year-old year if you can get through that and play. The biggest part and the problem for all these young guys is playing time. If you can't get that playing time, now you're kind of you kind of stagnate for a year, and you just hope you can get the following year you get the playing time. And guys like Wade Redden did the same. I remember watching Wade as a 16-year-old. Same thing for Wade. Like, he wasn't that big yet, and so if you can get on and he played. He was lucky he played. If you can get on a team, then a coach that trusts you and plays you, it's a big benefit.
Well, you already mentioned it when you played for Lloyd. Like, that's a confidence booster, right?
Yeah. And McCarr, he was here in Lloyd. That would have been, he was a late birth date, so that was his 17-year-old year. He was in Lloyd and at the Royal Bank Cup, and you could already tell that he was pretty good.
Yeah.
We just didn't know how good, and then the following year he kind of, just took off. They had a good team, and he was the confidence he had from playing, the year before, and you could just tell he was going to be a good player.
Speaking of, I'm jumping ahead here, but from your scouting background, I always hear and read things on parents be careful what you say in the stands, that kind of thing. And, I love the game of hockey, but if there's one thing about hockey that probably gives it a little bit of a bad name is the crazy hockey parent. Is that something you guys you probably see it on a daily basis and a rink basis. Is that something that is...
It's funny. That's the part of scouting that we've really, since when Steve arrived 8 or 9 years ago in Tampa, it was, we really dug into character, parents, schooling, just their on ice, but also their off ice, how they acted, how the parents, like what are we getting as a human being, what are we getting as a character person, and we wanted character. We were after character. We sacrificed some size for character, and the kids that we took that we knew had character flaws, and we kind of said, they're too good of players. They'll grow up. Some of those guys we made big mistakes on, and we passed on guys that were good players that we knew were good players because we needed a defenseman or a power play guy that we thought this guy's going to be really good if we just need him to mature. And we found it's not always that way. So we do a lot of digging into parents. We do a lot of digging into what the parents are like, for sure. And if there's a red flag, usually the old saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, a lot of times it's probably true that if mom and dad are a little crazy, the kid can be a little crazy too. So we definitely, I think that all the organizations, there's so much money involved, and you spend so much time developing kids now. We spend millions developing kids, our prospects, that if there's a character flaw, it kind of ends up being a waste of time.
Yeah, honestly, it makes a lot of sense to me. You see it on social media. I see it more and more.
Yeah, it's a problem. We're starting to find, and I think it's social media, and you hear about it maybe more, is the mental problems. These players have medication. A lot of them are, not a lot of them, but there's kids that you never thought would need to be watched mentally.
Yeah.
And you're seeing, maybe when I played, I didn't see it. I just, everybody seemed to be happy, and I think it's social media now with the phones and the negative part of the game, that the highs and lows of reading about yourself playing a good game and then playing a negative game or a bad game, and the negative part of all that. I think it really affects the mental part of kids, and we're starting to see a lot of, when we interview, that it's one of the things we really dig into, how mentally tough they are, because there's situations out there where the pressures and that comes from parents and agents and you name it, that it's tough on the kids.
you're in hockey world right here, right? Like the
Yeah.
Edmonton Oilers, we get to see it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
If they win a game, the world goes nuts. If they
Yeah.
lose a game, the world goes nuts.
Yeah.
Connor McDavid doesn't score, the world goes nuts.
Yeah.
And
It's a problem. It's a problem, and I know my son that plays in Charlottetown. He lived with the Doc family 2 years ago when he played in Edmonton, and they took their boys off social media. They didn't even have. They might have had a phone, but they weren't on. They weren't on Instagram. They weren't on Facebook. They weren't on Twitter. They'd had a bad experience when the boys were young, and it was so negative that they just took Kirby and Colton was the younger brother, and they just took him right off social media, and it was probably smart. They never, when you're good, people try and knock you down, and when you're bad, they're still knocking you down. So it can be real negative. And Kirby's playing the National Hockey League now as an 18-year-old, and that was one of the things that his parents did for him as a young kid.
I always joke, like my 4 years in college, so that's 2007 to 2011, I didn't have a cell phone. And I miss those days.
Yeah.
The phone beeping while it's sitting right beside me, and it beeps, I got to take a look, right?
Yeah.
And, there's a mazillion apps. And you can literally, when it comes to hockey specifically, you can get beeped every time somebody sneezes.
Yeah, it's and everything's video out there, and you can see yourself, I guess, have succession or succeed.
Yeah.
And the flip side is you see yourself make mistakes, and back then nobody cared because nobody saw it.
Or didn't get reviewed 20 times.
Right. So nobody, even coaches, you'd make a mistake. They really didn't know how the mistake happened and whose fault it was, and now they pinpoint it, and they can show it, and they can slice and dice it, and what a negative thing. It's a big negative thing. You can learn from it, and some kids, the Crosbys and those guys that want to see every shift on their iPad, even between shifts, you can learn from it. But the flip side is it can be real negative, and I think that's the problem we have now a little bit is it's
almost too much.
It's too much. It's too negative, and that's a lot of sports. That's not just hockey, but that's the one I'm in, and you watch it and you listen to our minor league guys, our minor league coaches talk about our minor league guys, or you go and watch one of your drafted guys play for there, and the coaches are always, usually it ends up being kind of negative. It's never really that positive. And so if you don't have player development guys, and we have a couple, and most teams have at least two now, going and helping their prospects and helping them talk about the game and showing them stuff and going on the ice with them, that's the difference that's also happened in the last probably 8-9 years is the development of development coaches and we have Barb Underhill that works with us, just skating development and skill development and knowledge development, and it's if you didn't help your kids and protect them, it would be a real negative experience for a lot of guys.
Still the best time the NHL's ever seen, though. Correct?
I think so. You watch the speed of the game and the skill of the person, and
do you miss the days? There's a lot of people that miss the days of, I don't know, Lindros, Pronger, the bone crunching hits, Scott Stevens, not Kevin Stevens, the big hits, the fights, etc.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. The problem they have is all these guys now have the mental problems. Like there's a lot of mental problems, and guys are getting paid a lot of money, and for them to be concussed or to sit on the sidelines, it costs everybody a lot of money. So the game has changed in that it's a speed and skills game. It's allowed the smaller player to play and be real successful, and I think it's a better game. I mean, you can still find some guys. I mean, it's hard to find guys that play that way. I mean, you just don't see guys hit. I laugh because the Ontario League, I mean, I think there's a 3-fight rule in the whole season, and after you have 3 fights, you start losing games.
Losing game, like you mean you get suspended? Okay, yeah.
In the Quebec Major, I think stage fighting, they start suspending you right away for stage fighting. but I don't think it's not as tight. And in the West, they've never. I asked the Western League guys all the time, like, have you guys changed any rules? Because there's no fighting anymore. And they said, Darryl, we've never changed our rules. You can have 3 fights a night every night. And the West, can't remember the last time I saw a fight. There's just no fighting.
And that's crazy, because I mean
you would think that there'd be some fights.
Yeah.
And the West is probably, Ontario's the least amount because there's literally no fighting because of the rules. The Q, there's some fighting, and in the West there's no fighting. There's the odd.
So why is there no fighting in the West?
I think it's just the way the kids are brought up now. Like, it just starts at Pee Wee, and just nobody hits, and they don't even when there's a scrum in front of the net, they don't even think about that part of the game anymore. Like, there's no shoving because it's a penalty. If you punch the guy in the face, it's probably head contact. It's 2 minutes right there, maybe 4 for head contact. Like, it's really changed the game. And now so that guy is obsolete. Like, they don't even draft those guys. The Western League, the OHL, and the Q, they wouldn't draft a whole lot of those kids. They want big, strong guys and competitive kids. The NHL, the old days of, all those big, strong guys used to go in the first and second and third rounds. Those guys don't get drafted now. There's no use for them. There's no spot for them on a team.
What do you think about them saying you need to have 2 different teams, though, a regular season team and then the playoff team?
Well, some years I think that's true. I mean, the Chicago Blackhawks were pretty skilled for a lot of years and won a lot of. They
still got a couple of boys on that team that can really go.
And they won just because they could outskill teams. It's last year. You had St. Louis. St. Louis won, and they were a bigger, stronger team. I know at the end, I listening to that last series against Boston, I know there was 2 or 3 times that things weren't called, that they ended up suspending the guy the next day. And I know by the end I'd heard they ran out of refs because they were doing such a bad job that they literally were down to their last couple of refs that people wanted them to ref games because it was such a bad ref event and things
bad because they weren't calling
the stuff that was
supposed to be penalty.
Like, yeah, guys were knocked out and there was a headshot and probably 5 in a game and they weren't called, and I think twice that series they suspended the guy the next day for a game that wasn't even called. So
that's going to change then too in time here, or maybe even as soon as this year. There won't be nearly as big a difference in the regular season reffing to the playoff reffing.
You'd like to think there's no. I mean,
you'd love to think that,
but it does. What happens is there's so many games now. Guys play every second night, so they probably play at 80%. On a good game, you might get the guys at 90%, but playoffs, guys are at 90 to 100%.
Yeah,
so it's a faster game. It's a more intense game, and it is probably more physical. Guys will pay a price, whether it's blocking shots or doing something to. And so the game does change in the playoffs just because the intensity does. Whether it's more physical, I suppose it is because it's more intense, but you put more on the line if it's reffed right. You put more on the line by being stupid.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
lose.
From yay high, and I'm pointing at the floor now, to when you're super young all the way up to that level, there's just a difference when now it's playoffs. And that isn't lost on refs either.
No,
now you can try and enforce that.
It's definitely playoffs hockey it's great hockey.
It's the best hockey in the world. The first round of the NHL playoffs, nothing beats it because when you got 16 teams going at it, every night, it's awesome.
And guys get worn out, so it's. I know I think it was last year, the Royal Bank Cup was in Chilliwack. I know maybe the last 2 out of the last 4 years in the Memorial Cup, the team that has won it lost out in the first round.
And then was healthy. That's what you're getting.
So they got a month, 6 weeks off, and the other teams beat the crap out of each other, and then comes down to the finals, and the team that was rested and healthy ended up winning, which
honestly makes a ton of sense to me.
It makes sense
because to win in hockey, it is a sport that is built on in the playoffs. you're going to play injured because it's hard not to. You play that many games that tight.
Yeah,
you beat up on each other.
It's tough hockey. It's
and by the end,
it's real tough hockey. It's the teams that are healthier at the end are the ones that win. They
got the guys that can go.
So,
right?
And that's why finishing a series in 4 or 5 games all the time is
such a big thing.
And then when you watch like Boston a few years ago go 7 games in every round, and that was, I guess, the year they beat Vancouver, I think they went 7 games every round. Like that's winning it tough. Like that's what they did it's incredible actually.
The pocketbook would be nice for the owner because you'd have a full stadium on the games.
Yeah, that's where they make their money. That's where they make their money. Yeah, it's big. It's huge money. Like it's crazy when they're filling rinks at $200-$300 a ticket. That there's a lot of money involved. And again, that's why owners, you watch whether if Connor McDavid's hurt for any length of time.
Yeah.
That could cost the Edmonton Oilers millions and millions of dollars. So to keep those guys healthy, your stars healthy, and we're in a sport where, nobody tries to injure the fourth line guy. They're always trying to injure the first line guy, and so you have to protect those guys a little bit, or else you wouldn't even have a league.
Well, I go back to my NBA story. I've only been to one NBA game. My wife is from Minnesota, so we go down there for Christmas. Go watch the Timberwolves, who just traded Wiggins, but that's regardless. But they have Wiggins and Towns, and they're playing Cleveland Cavaliers. It's not a showstopper game, but Cavaliers have Kevin Love. So between the three of them, I'm expecting all three of them don't play.
Yeah.
It was like, well, crap.
Yeah.
And, for the NHL, to bring it back there, right? Anytime Connor McDavid's gone for the Oilers, they still got star power there. But Connor McDavid is on an entirely different level than any player that's ever played the game.
Paying top dollar to go to a game, you want to see Wayne Gretzky play.
That's right.
You don't want to see, even they had Curry and all those guys. It was still, you're going to watch one.
You're going to watch Wayne.
Yeah, you go watch 1 or 2 guys off each team, and that's just the way it is. So if they're injured, it's keeping those guys healthy. It's just the way that for an owner to lose his top couple guys, not only is he has to pay those guys big salaries, but he's missing the playoffs. He's attendance is down, so
that's right.
It ends up being a lot of money.
How about Northern Michigan? Let's go back to your playing here. So you played in Lloyd, and I should point out I don't know about the Bobcats or the Blazers for that matter, but you do hold the record for the Lancers as the most points in a single season. Actually, I think you hold about 4 records there. You did put up 121 one season. Why Northern Michigan? And were the other suitors out there, or was it just Northern Michigan?
I talked in North Dakota and Wisconsin, Ohio State. At the time, Bowling Green was real good. I visited there. So I made visits to North Dakota, Northern Michigan, Bowling Green. And I was a small player, and I wanted to play, and Northern Michigan was losing a lot of guys that year, and they were taking a lot of kids out of Saskatchewan Junior. Dean Antos was my line mate. He went there. Dave Shayak was the captain of Humboldt. He went. They had the next year they brought in Jim Hiller and Scott Beatty. They were both BC kids that were playing in Melville. They brought in Jeff Simpson as a BC kid playing in Estevan. I think the year we won the national championship in 91, we had 15 Canadian kids, and maybe 10 or 12 played in the Saskatchewan Junior. So I wanted to go somewhere where I knew I could play. Wisconsin, North Dakota. They were just full of first and second round draft picks that you just, when you're small and back then everybody was big, that I just wanted to ensure that I was going to play, and I lucked out, and they've recruited some really good players, and we ended up having really good teams when I was there.
What was your first thought when it snowed about 10 feet in Marquette?
Well, my recruiting trip in there, you fly into Minneapolis, then you fly to Houghton, Michigan, which is where Michigan Tech is.
That's right.
And I flew in there, and there was at least a foot or two on all his trucks. So I think that I just missed a storm, and then it's about a 25-minute flight from Houghton to Marquette, and it was the wind coming off to the Great Lakes. Like it's pretty intense, and I think a guy named Walt Kyle was the coach and recruiter. He picked me up, and within 15 minutes, one of the players had slid through, hit some ice and T-boned us, and then they walk around campus, and it's just a total whiteout the whole time. So part of it was, I went to Marquette, and the first thing I thought of was it's a lot like Lloydminster. The rink's about, it's not the best rink, it's not the worst rink, but the first thing I thought of was I'd fit in. And then when you get there, the Great Lakes are phenomenal.
Yes, they are.
The summers are incredible. The falls are incredible. The winters are harsh. There's some nasty storms that come off the Lake Superior that make it. You get to miss school at least. That was probably the only thing. But it's a hardy bunch up there. It's a tough group of people. There are a lot of Finnish people in there, and people are hardworking there. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Let's go to the year you won. We can talk about any of the other years if they stick out or if there's memorable. But I mean, what was that year like? That's your final year, correct?
Yeah, that was my final year. Yeah.
Were you wearing the C that year?
I was assistant. Dean Antos was the captain.
Okay,
I was assistant. So it was we knew going in we were gonna have a really good team. We had Brad Wawrinka was an Oiler draft at the time, and Dallas Drake was a Detroit draft.
Okay.
And Jim Hiller was a LA draft, and we had a stacked team. We lost one game in Minnesota. We lost one game against Maine Black Bears that year in Portland, Maine. It was the largest crowd ever to watch a hockey game in the state of Maine, and that was when when the University of Maine had stacked teams like Montgomery, and they were the best team, one of the best teams. We just before Christmas that year, we were ranked number 1, and we went to St. Cloud State, and we lost 2 games right before Christmas, and it dropped us down, but nobody was too happy about it. We came back after Christmas that year, and we ran the table. We didn't lose a game after Christmas that year, so I think we won. I want to say 26 in a row is what we ended up winning, and we could score goals. We averaged over 6 goals a game. We could defend.
Averaged over 6 goals a game.
We could slug it out. Division 1. We could slug it out with anybody. So we ran the table. We beat Wisconsin's. The powerhouses that back then were in the West. The WCHA were Minnesota, Wisconsin, and North Dakota, and we beat up on all those teams. We swept them all. We went. I think that was the year we played Alaska Anchorage in the second round of the playoffs, and that was Paul Craik, Lloyd kid was the goalie there. So
okay,
we had we smoked them. That was they upset BC that year, which BC was a powerhouse, and then we got to have them in the second round to get us to the Final Four. And Final Four was we played Maine again, and
Now, Final Four, refresh my memory.
We're in St. Paul's Civic Center.
Yeah.
So they had
everybody's at a central location.
So they brought in that side story was, so I think the first game was Thursday, and then a day off, and we played Saturday. Wednesday was a banquet, and we had a charter. We got to the bus at 7 a.m. We were supposed to charter out to Minneapolis. We were fogged in. So they said, come back at noon. I'm sure the fog will lift. So we came back at noon, and the fog hadn't lifted. So they rented 2 buses, and we started busing. And we played the early game. We played the 3 o'clock game that the next afternoon. We missed the banquet, which nobody really wanted to go to anyway. We got there at around 9 o'clock at night. We practiced maybe 45 minutes. We undressed, got in our hotel, slept. And then we played Maine I think we had the 3 o'clock game. Well, I know we had the 3 o'clock game. And we played good. We beat Maine 5-3, I think, an open netter. And BU was, I think they played Clarkson. And BU was a stud team. They had a Monty and Keith Kachuk and McEachran. They had Peter Ahola. They had 6 guys playing the National Hockey League the following year off that team, and we slugged it out with them. We were down 3-0 after 1. We're up 5-3 after 2. I think we gotten up to 7-4 with 6 minutes left, and we lost the lead. And we hadn't lost.
You were up 7-4 with 6 minutes left. That's part of the old story that gets left out.
And they scored 3 to tie it with 30 seconds, and then they had a breakaway with 2 seconds. So our team just totally fell. The wheels fell off, and we regrouped, and then we set an all-time record for 3 overtimes, longest goal or longest game in college hockey history.
So back this up for a second. That was a really fast take on it. I'd like to point out the plane getting fogged in. That is something that can make or break. Because, I mean, it could have easily went down and played Maine, lost, and been like blamed it on the fog and been like, oh, poor me. But championship teams usually use that as a good character thing and a good chuckle, and they go out and play. And, I mean, obviously you guys win it all, so it's a nice little feather in your cap. Now, on Boston, say that again. You had Tony Amonte, and if you listen and watch the game-winning goal, the commentators talk about how you were there to shut down Amonte. Yeah, but who were the other big ones?
Keith Tkachuk was on the team.
Keith Tkachuk, yeah.
McEachran was on the. Ed Ronan played with Montreal the next year. I think won the cup. The Sackos were there. Like it was.
They were a good team.
They put 6 guys. The next year, '92 was the year that. It was an Olympic year, and 6 guys off that team played on the Olympic team, and then after the Olympics were done, they all went and played the National Hockey League, and they were good. They
Whoa.
Darren McDonald, the Lloyd kid, was on that team. He was he went there as a young kid. They were loaded. They had superstars on. Went to the National Hockey League and ended up being superstars. We had. Brad Wawrinka played in the National Hockey League. Probably our guy that played the most games was Dallas Drake. Played with Detroit and St. Louis and won a cup. I think he retired a couple years ago. Or the last game he won was he won the cup with Detroit when they won the cup in 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
But we had Jim Hiller was on the team. He played. He's coaching now with the New York Islanders. We probably had 6 kids drafted, and we had a couple guys sign free agents after the year. But their whole team was drafted and signed. Like they were just. We were a little bit older, and they were probably. Our average age was probably 21, and their average age was probably 19 and a half. And but we had guys. We had. Scott Beattie went to Europe. He was leading the nation in scoring. We had a guy named Mark Buffet who was a San Jose draft. He was our 4th line center and had 60-some points that year. So we could slug it out and play with anybody, and then we end up winning 8-7 in the final game. So it was
that's a final.
You don't see games like that anymore.
How was I love college fans. Division I hockey's fun. I mean, it doesn't compare to maybe Division I football that gets 100,000. But what was the atmosphere like? Well, you would have played in multiple places, maybe in your rink for starters, but then in the finals. I mean, the 3-period game at the end.
Yeah,
by the end, it'd be a little bit.
We were sold out all the time. Our rink probably held 4,500, and especially our first year was a down year. We were maybe 500. After that, we were good, and then we were sold out all the time. We'd go to the St. Paul Civic Center where there's probably 8,000 people from alumni to fans coming in. I know, the party after. I know people were arrested. Like it was total chaos. It was like people.
Did you guys stay in Minneapolis?
We stayed overnight, and then that night it was just. Like the game went till probably 10:30, 11 o'clock. It went forever.
Well, 3 extra periods, man.
And then, you got to do your interviews and you got to do all that kind of stuff. So by the time you get back to the hotel, it's after midnight. And I know the Marquette people again. They're Finnish, a lot of Finnish people, and they know how to drink and have a good time. And it was they had a good time. I know there was multiple arrests, and then we flew back, and yeah, it was like miles and miles of people just, it was amazing. Back then, the top teams always won. Like North Dakota was every year there, Wisconsin, Maine, and Boston College. Like there was 5 schools every year, and usually one of them always won. And then we came along, Lake Superior State, us and Lake Superior State. We won one. Lake Superior might have won a couple in that. And they had Dougie Waite and a few of those guys. They had Rolston, Dougie Waite. They had a few guys that they had good teams too. So the UP of Michigan, and people would know that what it is. It's the very top of Michigan. Right
I know exactly.
Right on Lake Superior, and it's desolate. And but people are big hockey fans there, and they just happened to have 2 hockey programs that were the two of the best in the nation, 2 hours from each other. And one was we were in the WCHA, Lake State was in the CCHA, and they won, for about a 3-year period. Our 2 teams won all of the national championships. So it was, it will never be probably done again, just because it's tough to recruit into those places now. And there's 60 college teams recruiting. So it's, it was a bit of an anomaly, but it was well worth it for sure. It was fun times, good times.
How long did it take the grin to go off your face? Not only being there to shut down a Montez, to say, but scoring a hat trick, the game winner in triple overtime, then to be a national champ.
Yeah.
All in the same.
Well, it was, it's hard to even explain. Again, we had a good team, but we had quality guys. Like it was, again, when you're down 3-0 after one period, or when you can't fly to the Minneapolis, you have to drive a bus. Like it didn't phase this team. Like the team was tough. Like we had mentally tough guys that a lot of them went on to play in the National Hockey League, but guys went to Europe, and guys were you have to be mentally, like we were talking about mental problems before. If somebody had a mental problem on that team, it would have showed up. Again, I never saw that type of stuff when I was playing. Guys that would mentally fizzle or be suicidal or that type of stuff, and that team was just. It was a fun time. We you always hear of these teams that have spent their time together. This team, if there was everybody'd go to the movie. If there's a party, everybody had to be at the party. If there was everybody ate together. It was just one of those things that everybody's with their best friend, and there was no, we had high-end draft picks in the National Hockey League. Guys that everybody knew were going on and play in the National Hockey League, and we had guys that were our leading scorers that you knew that weren't going to, and nobody seemed to care. Well, there was no animosity, there was no jealousy, and the team just dropped the puck and the team played, and so going in there, I mean, we hadn't lost all year after Christmas. There was never I don't think that team ever thought they would ever lose. It was just one of those things. We were going there to win it all, and it wasn't even a big deal.
In your playing time, was there a rink you just loved playing in?
I like playing in North Dakota. Some of those rinks are college hockey's changed. Like North Dakota's even got a new rink, and they had a great rink.
Yeah.
Wisconsin's got a nice 14,000 seat rink, and I think most of Denver's got a new rink, and Colorado's getting a new rink. Everybody's got a new rink. Minnesota Duluth's got a new rink. Back then it was different. Like you go to Wisconsin, it'd be sold out, and there's the band and everything. When we were starting out, that team was starting out, we got thumped. Like when I say we were a battle-tested group, we'd go to Wisconsin and lose by 8, or we'd go to the University of Minnesota and they'd run the score up on us, and people would just be mocking you, and then, so our last 2 years, like we took our pound of flesh on a lot of teams, and we had tough guys. Like we had some guys that Dave Shyak, like these guys were 200 and some penalty minutes in the Saskatchewan Junior. Like it was tough hockey. Like guys ran at each other, and guys tried to hurt one another, and you can get away with a lot. Back then, you could get away with a lot in college hockey, and So we weren't very. We had a lot of smaller players, but we were tough. We played hard, and ultimately we could score goals, which was the big difference.
What was your weapon of choice? Now in today's world, you can get a one-piece stick that's just shy of $400. Let's call it. Back then, solid wood, or was it two-piece stick?
I was solid wood, Christian Brothers when I was in college, and then along came those old Easton aluminum shafts.
Easton aluminum, yeah.
And you could stick in the Christian Brothers. So that was that I used my last year, and from that point on, for a lot of years I used two-piece, just when I was on the ice.
Yeah.
And the last probably 7-8 years, the new sticks are nice.
Oh no, new sticks are ridiculously nice.
As you get older and weaker, and you can still shoot a puck, you need the whip, but the new sticks, the problem you have is again, it comes down to touching the puck a lot. If you're in an association or a team that doesn't have skill practice and you don't touch a puck a lot, those new sticks aren't conducive to guys not touching the puck. You need to. The top end guys can make those things hum, but if you're not a skilled person, you might as well have a wood stick, because those new composite graphite sticks or whatever they are now, sometimes it's tough to feel the puck on your stick. So if you don't have enough skill, it shows up. I think it. The old days of feeling that puck, that wooden stick, you could always feel the puck. And then that was the biggest thing I know, probably 10 and 12 years ago, whenever it started changing. That was the biggest thing you could hear all the old pros or guys that were teaching their kids, guys that were older or retired, was the first thing they always said, I can't feel the puck on these new sticks. And now you can, and I think the stick is better, but also, the skill of that player is better too.
Just weight alone, the new stick it's a feather that can absolutely drill. You talk about not needing the strength, but you can just absolutely rifle a puck.
And I talk about this when I played on the Lancers. There's probably 4 guys that could shoot a puck, really well. Yeah. There's probably 10 guys that had decent shots, and then there's probably 4 or 5 guys that couldn't shoot a puck. Now you go to watch warm up, the Oil Kings or the Saskatoon Blades, they can all shoot a puck. They don't know where they're going. Most of them don't know where it's going, but guys can shoot a puck, and that's why now you see the injuries and stuff like the ankles, and now most people are wearing something on their ankles because you get hit those skates with the puck. Now everybody can shoot it. I mean, you're getting hurt.
What was it, the AHL All-Star game? The guy does 109 miles. Imagine taking that one in the foot.
Yeah, and that kid's always been able to shoot a puck. He I can't remember his name. He played in Halifax when they won the World Cup with McKinnon and Drouin, and he's always been able to shoot a puck. But now you put the right flex and the right curve on those, and man, oh man, they come off the stick hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, who all shot in that? I can't even think of it right now. But there were some small guys shooting the hardest shot this year that could absolutely just drill a puck. Well, Pettersson was one of them.
Yeah. And
he's not a big man.
No. It's technique. A lot of it's just technique. Again, the skill development. Like, those kids have shot pucks hundreds of thousands of times. Like, it's just their technique and the way they're. I played with some guys that they were the skinniest guys, but they knew how to shoot a puck. And then you get the guys that are big, heavy guys. They can't shoot a puck. It doesn't make sense. But it's technique, how you using your back, using your legs, using your ankles, using your your wrists to shoot a puck rather than just kind of shooting a puck. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, it's leverage and everything else, right? I've seen that in baseball tons, or ball.
Creating power.
Yeah, using your body, using your legs, using everything, the torque of the twist.
It's your back. I mean, it's your legs, it's your back. It's a lot of things, and if you can shoot a puck, I mean, you have a chance to score a goal.
That's right.
If you can't, then you're just hoping. You're hoping for luck. Which a lot of guys are hoping for luck.
So you win the national championship. You go back. I assume you graduate.
Yep.
What'd you graduate with a degree in?
speech comm, business minor, and I stayed there 1 year, and I worked on my master's in political science. And then my coach there, Walt Kyle, got the head coaching job in Seattle with the Thunderbirds.
So were you coaching at the time?
I was a grad assistant for a year.
Grad assistant for a year.
And then
Did you have, before you hopped to Seattle, did you have no thought of like, hey, let's carry on?
I didn't want to go to the East Coast, and I had chances to go to Europe, but back then the top European leagues they had all the import rules, so you're allowed like 3 imports on let's say the DEL in Germany, you could have 3 imports, and that was all ex-pros. And at the time I was 22. You know, my backs and hips were not good, and I thought maybe the next thing I could get into was coaching. So I had an opportunity, and looking back, now that I've been to Europe, I probably missed a really good opportunity to go to Europe, and you know, some guys that I played with went there for 10, 15 years.
That's right, yeah.
And made lots of money, and but when you don't know what it's all about, you know, Germany and Switzerland and these places are just phenomenal. Like, you know, the money's good, the opportunity's good, and the lifestyle's really good. You play your 45 games, and I go to those games now, and they're fun games to go to. But I got into coaching, and I was coached with Seattle for 2 years, and then Walt took off and was the assistant coach in Anaheim, and I took over Seattle scouting for 4 years. So
let's stop right there. So you went into coaching for essentially 3 years.
Yeah.
Was there a part of you that always wanted to be a scout? Always wanted to be a
coach?
No,
I still like coaching. I think that coaching is now that my kids are involved and I've been able to coach the last 10 years just on the side, not necessarily teams. You know, I really liked coaching. The problem with coaching was is getting an opportunity when you're young, and you know, my opportunity opened to take over their scouting for Seattle. So I just said, you know, I get to move back to Canada. You can live in one spot and scout, whereas coaching, you're always if you're good, you're moving. If you're bad, you're moving. It's just, they never ever seem to be in one spot too long. That kind of come into play. But once I was scouting for 2 years, I think I got offered a job by Boston. My second year scouting with Seattle. And then the next year I got offered a job with San Jose. I turned those 2 down. And then my 4th year I got offered a job with Buffalo.
You turned down San Jose?
And I took the Buffalo job. Yeah, I just didn't. I enjoyed. I was only 25 at the time, 26, and I enjoyed the amateur stuff with Seattle. We'd got good teams. Patrick Marleau was on the team, and we had a real good team. One year we went to the finals with a bunch of 17-year-olds. And we lost out to Lethbridge, but that was Patrick Marleau and Jeremy Craik, and we had like 5 or 6 guys drafted in National Hockey that year. So I was having fun. And then after my 4th year, Buffalo, Scotty Bowman's brother passed away, was the head scout. So they were looking for a guy, and I thought, I better not waste too many opportunities to get into that, because I knew a lot of guys were trying to get in and couldn't. And so it was my chance to get in, and then once you're into there, you know, coaching's kind of over. So it was just kind of a Y in the road, and I took the scouting, and I've never looked back.
Never looked back. And I should point out, I hear San Jose, and I think you're moving to San Jose, but you're not really moving to San Jose.
You're living in somewhere in Western Canada, probably.
So
Calgary.
let's talk about it. So you, first off, your first year as the head scout of Seattle, you select Patty Marleau, correct?
Our first year, I just took it over that year, and we had a group. Like I was just getting involved, and that year we took Patrick Marleau at about 6th or 7th overall, and
6th overall, and he's one of 3 guys in that first round to play meaningful time in the NHL. Him, Hannah, and Ferentz.
He plays next year. He'll have 1,700 and some games. He'll beat Gordie Howe's record. Yeah. So he's gonna play 23, 24 years. He was. So when we drafted him, he was a tiny little guy.
So I'm curious, when you drafted him, when he steps into Seattle, was he that same kid? Like, did you?
When we drafted him, he was playing in Swift Current, He's from Android, Saskatchewan. He was probably 5'7" or 8", maybe 9. He was small, and we thought we were going to get a player that would play for us for 5 years. We get him in as a 16-year-old. He'd play and score goals, and we'd get a long-term player that would help us win. He went back as a 15-year-old, and he started to grow. He led the Swift Current Legionnaires in scoring, led the league in scoring. I talked to his dad at Christmas time that year, so he was still 15. He was 15 at the time, and I said to Dennis, geez, you know what, Patrick's going to be, ready to play next year. And he wasn't quite sold that Patrick would be ready to play in the Western Hockey League the next year. By the time we got a hold of him, he was a September 15th birthday, so we got a hold of him at camp. He was probably 6'1", and he was probably 190 pounds already. That year, so he was, if he was a day younger, he wouldn't even have been eligible for that draft. So as a 16-year-old, he led our team in scoring. I think he had a point a game. The following year, he just exploded and was just a machine. He was probably 6'1 and a half, 210 by then. Like he was a beast and powerful. And Thornton went 1 and Patrick went 2, and we never saw him again. I think he was the second youngest guy to ever score a goal in the National Hockey League. So he was, September 15th birthday. If he's September 16th, we have him for sure the following year. And that was that year we won the West of the Western Hockey League and played Lethbridge in the finals with all 17-year-old kids. We lost Patrick that year, the next year, and we brought in Mark Parrish. So if we would have kept Patrick and brought in Mark Parrish, we would have been lights out team. The team was still really good, but we lost Patrick was a big loss.
He's still fun to watch. He's so fast.
He's just never been injured, and he's graceful. Like he's just powerful and skilled and knows how to play the game. And he's if he plays next year, which I'm sure he'll play one more year just to get that record.
Why not?
He's going to have the all-time 1,760 some games. Gordie Howe, who ever thought anybody in this day and age could do it? And Patrick's the one.
Speaking of records, you think Ovechkin passes Gretzky?
I'm going to say no. I think it's too hard. But
how old is Ovechkin right now? 35? 34?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just think their team as a whole is going to start taking, like he's got to go another 4 or 5 years, and it's tough. At some point, he's going to take a step back and start scoring 30 rather than 50 every year.
85. So he's turning 35.
Yeah. It's hard. What he's doing is, again, people don't realize how big those guys are. Like, he's probably 235 pounds. Like, they're football players is what they are. Even Crosby's 225, 220, and he's 5'10" and a half. Those guys are big men. And that's the part that the NHL is. It's not necessarily tall anymore, but you got to be powerful. At the NHL now, if you're not willing to put in the time, it spits you out real quick. Even really junior. The old days of guys not training and just being really good players, I don't know if they exist. It's too hard. Everybody's training at 14, 15, 16. Once you hit pro, like you're spending your summers in the gym and getting ready to improve. It's all you're ever trying to do is improve. And that's why I think when you see guys at the end, they just they might take a short breath to maybe they exhale over the summer and don't train quite as hard. They're out and they never get back in. And that's how tough it is to play in the National Hockey League now.
Well, I hear it on this podcast time and time again. The line between making it and not making it when you're that close is that close.
Yeah. It's an opportunity a lot of times, a coach or, an injury.
I just had Blair Atchingham on before he played with St. Louis and then Chicago a little bit. And he was in the minors, I think. What did I say? 8 years, something like that. And then Joel Quenneville finally pulled him up with St. Louis, and then he plays a full season. Actually plays several full seasons.
Yeah, it's an opportunity.
That was Joel Quenneville was an old teammate of his.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of times we talk about it all the time. You know, you're sitting in the minors and you can't play for this team, and then you get traded over, and all of a sudden you can play and be a real good player for somebody else. It's just opportunity and being in the right place at the right time. Part of the problem with us in Tampa Bay the last few years, knock on wood, is we haven't had that many injuries, so we haven't been able to get a lot of guys in, which development-wise probably hurts them a little bit.
But you're also like your guys' franchise right now is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, we'll point it out. You don't have the cups.
No.
But talent-wise,
they're fun to watch. Let's put it that way. They, you go watch when that team is humming, and firing on all cylinders. It's a fun brand of hockey to watch. Like, you put the right two teams together, and you can see some pretty incredible things. Pace and skill and scoring ability and just the thinking that some of these guys think at now. That's what separates almost all hockey players now is their character and their hockey sense.
Stamkos was a cool one for me. I got to go to, I was in Florida, 2011, so what's that? Year 3 of him being in the NHL, something like that. And he still sticks out in my mind. By no means, I mean, you're in the rinks all the time. You've got to see a lot of talented hockey players. But Stamkos, for me, he was playing Chicago that night, so he had Kane and Taves, and at that time, you had St. Louis and Tampa Bay and probably Vincent Lecavalier, I would assume.
Vinny would have been there, yeah.
And Stamkos was the hardest working guy on the ice at all times, and he was that noticeable. It was crazy for a talented player like that.
And then their summers, that doesn't change. Like, they do skating and skills all summer. You go to a rink in Toronto, and you'll see John Tavares out there with a skating coach for an hour, and then they do skills. And one of the things that you talk to, I had a chance to work with Steve Thomas. Stumpy would say those guys hate actually playing after they're done because when they lose their skill, they lose it over a summer. Like it's gone, and that's why those pros now they spend so much time skating and skills because. If they take it off and don't shoot pucks or don't stick handle over the summer, you just can't pick it up in September. You don't just pick up your stick anymore and start.
And away you go.
And away you go. It's like your muscle memory. Things deteriorate fast. And other sports help, whether it's lacrosse or Stammer was a great baseball player too. So you can see why he can shoot the one-timer. His hand-eye is really good. So there's usually something that this guy's done in the past that's helped him along the road that allow him to be what he is today. And it's lacrosse players or baseball players or golfers. As much as those guys are pretty talented hand-eye to be able to score goals and fire pucks like they do. They've got special talent.
What was it about Buffalo? You'd said that San Jose and then one other.
Boston.
Oh, Boston, right. What was it about just the opportunity then?
I don't know. I just sometimes you got to feel like you're ready. Like I was just a young guy, and sometimes you need to get a little older and gain some experience. And
was there anyone? Sorry to cut you off. Was there anyone that kind of, I'm curious, a guy who played as good as hockey as he did, then coached a little bit, and then took over scouting for Seattle. Was there anyone who kind of like mentored you when you were going into the rinks and this is what you should try and watch for? Did you just pick it up on your own, or did you just kind of?
Yeah, I was only, when I started with Seattle, I had been only 24, 25, somewhere in there. Not really. I knew I'd coached enough and played enough that I knew what I wanted to see in a player. And I guess how I base it even today is, how would this guy fit on my team? What's he going to do on my team? If I was to have a team, like, how is he going to play? What's he going to do? And I probably still scout that way as far as watching a kid play, and it doesn't matter how big or small or strong or how what's going to allow him to play. And if I was to coach, how would I play him? And so that's kind of the way I started. The whole thing was going after these kids, and in Seattle, I had great success in Saskatchewan. They used to have this old Center 4 league, which was Humboldt, Nacum, PA, Shellbrook, all the way to North Battleford, down to Bigger, I think. It was an awesome Bantam hockey league, and we stuck our butt in there, and we drafted a lot of kids out of rural Saskatchewan and even rural Alberta. And at the time, the rural places were producing all the players. That you go to the big cities and you kind of laugh at how bad the players were. Edmonton and Calgary, they produced some players, but for the amount of kids that were playing, and we just said, no way, we want the tough kids, the mentally tough kids that were farm boys, and we could still find them. That league now doesn't even exist. It hasn't existed for a while, and it's shameful to watch the deterioration of rural hockey. It just doesn't. There's just no hockey. There's no families playing hockey. There's nobody in Nacum even running. There's no Bantam team. So the disappointing part of the last probably 15 years for me is to watch places like Yorkton and Melville struggle to put Bantam hockey teams on, and places like Nacum and these places don't even. There's no league. There's no team, and Maidstone. That Maidstone was in that league back then. There's just no hockey anymore.
I was wondering if when Wade was playing, Dad and Gord coached that team, and then you had Wade and Bart. Obviously, you had Travis Clayton.
Yeah.
My brother played on that team.
Yeah. So those teams those things don't even exist anymore, and we've lost a lot of. It's the same in rural Nova Scotia, rural everywhere. Those kids that used to come up and be really good players. I don't think they play hockey anymore.
And why do you think that is?
Just there's no rink. There's not enough kids to even ice a team, so there's no team. That's the problem. And now you flip around, and I bet you if you ask the Western Hockey League guys, there's nobody comes from rural areas and everybody comes from the city. And part of it is the way hockey's gone, morphed into a 10-month sport of skating and skills, and they're all in the big city. They don't. Lloydminster is probably okay because it's a big enough city. They probably keep enough rinks open in the summer. That Lloyd's had a good run in the last 10 years of producing some hockey players. Part of it is they've had some expertise. The biggest problem I see in Canada is we've lost our expertise to the States, in that Patrick Marleau from Aneroid, Saskatchewan is never going to go back to Swift Current or Aneroid, Saskatchewan. He's going to live in San Jose or somewhere, and his kids and the kids in that area will benefit from him.
Yeah.
And that's happening in Dallas now. That's happening in Colorado, in Denver, and all those places that didn't have minor hockey.
No.
Now they've got Keith Kachuk running St. Louis minor hockey and producing. 4 or 5 years ago, they had four or five first rounders out of that St. Louis minor hockey system. That used to be Saskatchewan. Now that's a little tiny place, and minor hockey isn't that big in St. Louis, but they're still producing players because they have the expertise. And now the big cities have the expertise, whether it's the skating person or the camps are all in Edmonton or Calgary or even I guess Red Deer, but they don't exist in smaller towns, and that's really hurt the development of rural Alberta, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia. It's a dying sport.
It's kind of sad to hear you talk about it that way.
It is sad. It is sad. Those guys that, I talked to guys that are scouting and from Saskatchewan. They said back in the old day, Tyler Wright and these guys that were great Western Hockey League players played in the National Hockey League. You can go to any little town in Saskatchewan and they'd all have teams, and they always say there would be one guy that was the best player that went on and played in the Western Hockey League. Every town had one, at least one. And now they're like, there's not even a town. Not alone there's no team, there's some places there's no town. That's just the progression of people moving into the cities and those old, all those farming communities. Wade was lucky because Gord came back and farmed, come back from whatever the Central Hockey League.
Yeah, Fort Worth.
Well, that would never happen anymore. Those people that really don't come back. Now you have, those farm kids don't.
Well, I'd laugh. You talk about San Jose and California and Florida. It's like, well, why would you come?
Why would you? They marry an American woman, and she doesn't want to go live in Maidstone, Saskatchewan.
So I'm an anomaly bringing a woman back from Minneapolis.
You're a lucky man.
I am a lucky man. She'll never listen to this anyway. She finds hockey quite boring, which is
so that's everywhere. Like that just happens everywhere. Like Meadow Lake used to produce all kinds of players. I don't even have to even have a team anymore. Like I'd like to know. I know they're not in the center four anymore because I used to go up there and watch, the center four. I'd go to Maidstone and watch it. I'd go up to Meadow Lake and watch it. I'd go to you can go to Humboldt. Like those were just the best league in Western Canada. Those kids they'd go to the St. Albert tournament in January, and there'd be a team from Thunder Bay and there'd be a team from Nacum, and those teams beat the crap out of people.
Yeah,
and it was all. We coveted those kids. Like, they're all high draft picks. We were, if you go to the following year to watch a midget, you'd be listing their players. Like, they had a really good thing going back in those days. And once you've lost it, it's tough to.
It's hard to get it back.
Tough to get it back.
Yeah, everybody talks about the Midwest Red Wings, which was Maidstone, right? Because for a lot of years there, they were.
Yeah.
Well, the best kids in that area went and played there, and they competed.
Yeah, and now, I mean, I drove by Maidstone today. I don't even know if they have a rink there anymore. Like you drive around the city, you drive around the town, and
so I still play senior for the Saskatchewan. We play Meadow Lake game 1 tomorrow night.
Oh, good.
And so we're playing against DJ King, who was had a cup of coffee, and Nasty Marasti still coming out, and he fought a lot of tough men.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Dwight King's not playing with him, but he's another guy who's played.
Yeah. They used to, like, those are big, tough guys out of that area. They had skilled guys come out of that area, too. They had skilled hockey players coming out of there for a long time.
I'm trying to think of the names, but if you go in their rink, they got all the jerseys hanging on the rafters.
There's one guy that played in St. Louis, or in San Jose.
Falloon?
No,
not Falloon.
He played Regina Pats, first round pick. He was a top 5 pick in that. He was a small kid growing up, and at about 15, 16 started to grow, and all of a sudden he was in San Jose for a lot of years.
Friesen. Jeff Friesen.
Like, they had players like that coming out of there.
Well, here's the guys that it lists: Jeff Friesen, Blake Como, Dwight King, DJ King.
Yeah. Como's still playing, I think.
I mean, it does list a few others, but those are the ones who played the most games.
Yeah. No, that was kind of the heyday of back then. I bet you per capita, Saskatchewan was maybe producing the most NHL players. That would be 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. But
for capita and the amount of kids playing, they produce a tremendous amount of players. I don't think that happens anymore.
Well, I can speak from a family of 4 boys and a girl. There's 5 siblings. We grew up farming, and shouldn't say none of us farm anymore. There's a couple that run cattle a little bit, but none of us full-time farm anymore. It's an expensive endeavor now, right? Like, I mean, in order to have the land, all the equipment, et cetera, like that's tough. And so all those little communities were made up of that. They all went to the same place, but I mean,
it doesn't exist.
And
you just
quickly
think about,
fading.
If you're living on the farm as a young person, your mom and dad don't have the time to put into summer hockey, or you just spring and fall are huge commitments for your family to farm, and those are big times for hockey players. And
when you talk about actually, I talked to a lot of guys that were from small town, rural Saskatchewan, Alberta, and as kids, I can speak for myself too. Dad used to help out with the rink, put in the natural ice, so you'd always be on it. He'd go down and flood, and you'd skate, whatever. And so the rural communities, the kids like the Wade comes to mind, would always be on the ice because they had access to it all the time. Whereas in the cities, they probably didn't have. I could maybe throw an argument that there wasn't as much ice available, and now that's almost flip-flopped. Like, now you have, like you say, you have ice all year round. You got to pay for it, but it's still sitting there.
Well, I would bet, 20 years ago, Maidstone, between recesses at noon hour, you could go on the Maidstone ice.
Yeah.
I bet you now, because of insurance,
They don't allow it.
so there's an hour lost every day. Jim Benning's a good friend of mine. The Bennings, the Plandowskis, this is 35 years ago now. All from one block in St. Albert. All 4 or 5 of them played the National Hockey League off that one block. Guess what was at the end of the rink, or at the end of the street? An outdoor rink. So if you're on the rink all the time,
It's going to help.
I try and tell us to parents, if you tell me who the best reader is, a kid that reads 5 times a week or a kid that reads twice a week, and they go, well, for sure it's a 5. I'm like, yeah, it's a skill. Like, you're learning a skill. Hockey or soccer or golf, it's the same. If you don't practice or do something in that sport that much, how do you expect to be good at it? And unfortunately, hockey's gotten expensive as far as renting ice, but I can fly over a lot of little towns like Lloydminster, and I bet you there's outdoor rinks
Everywhere.
It's
Well, we
just
do.
whether you go
The
out.
one lovely thing about Canada is we get about 8 months of winter, and probably 7 of that you can probably be on the ice, I bet.
You can definitely, if you have if you're in the right spot with a bunch of young kids and a couple of parents that just say, listen, I'll drive you over to the rink, or you guys, I'll chaperone or whatever. What an advantage. It was Jonathan Taves, all those guys. When I was starting out with Seattle, Manitoba produced no players, absolutely no players. You went in there, you wouldn't draft any of their players. Winnipeg was, again, a big city. They didn't produce any players. The little towns, they didn't produce a lot. And then one of my last years of scouting, they started putting in ice right beside there'd be at least one pad, maybe 2 outdoor rinks beside a hockey rink. And they put boards and they put chicken wire, and the Zamboni would come out once an hour and scrape it. And all of a sudden, they started producing players. Jonathan Taves, all those kids started coming out of there because they were on the ice and practicing and having fun, just playing shinny. And there's
Something to be said about being
if you're on the ice
access to
and doing something that you love, those kids would love that. And like you always hear the stories, they after school hit the ice and then get called in at 9 to go to bed. Like, that's what those kids did. And it parlayed into superstars.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah. And now it's just finding enough kids in an area that want to even actually go out and play shinny. You probably need 6 guys.
Yeah, I'd argue you could get a solid game of 2-on-2 going.
Yeah, you probably could, but it's to find
It's
if you're in the wrong block or
Yeah.
in the wrong area
Yep.
of town, it doesn't matter. But if you're in the right, again, luck comes into play. If you're in the right spot with all your buddies are sitting there every night. Now, back when we played, video games were just starting to come on board. I think that takes a big portion of people's time, that kids would rather stay inside and play video games and go out and shoot pucks. And made a difference. Makes a difference.
Well, and just the ease of entertainment today makes a difference. Whether you're talking video games,
Yeah.
whether you're talking, you
Computer.
flick on the TV and there's 100 channels. I
Yeah.
remember a time at the Newman household, you'd flick on the TV and you had 2 channels.
Yeah.
It was news or news. And it was like, well, what are you going to do? Right?
Yeah.
Everybody go out on the ice, and the oldest brother would haul you out there, and
Yeah, that's
away you go.
so everything changes. I mean, change is inevitable, and now you have to love something. I mean, it's an anomaly almost for some of those kids to come out of a certain area.
Yeah.
Just because you're like, how did that happen? They didn't have this, they didn't have that. But like, what's his face with Toronto coming out of Phoenix?
Matthews.
Yeah. And then I laughed at the day after the draft. There was a big thing in the Toronto Star, how he ended up developing and being a good player. And he, not from a rich family, he lived near a 3-on-3 rink, and he was a decent player. And he had 4 or 5 different colors jerseys, and every day somebody would need a player. They called him. He'd go out and play with them. And I laughed because I know every parent in Toronto would have been looking at that going, come on, it's not that easy. You got to spend money to be good. And he spent no money to be good. He was just on the rink all the time.
Wanted to play.
And I guarantee there'd have been 90% of those parents that read that story wouldn't have believed it and didn't think that kid or their kid could do that what he did. And, you got to be on the spring team. You got to spend a lot of money at this, or else you can't be any good. You got to get your 10,000 hours, and that's the outliers. Like, I see that now, 10,000 hours. That's all I ever hear is 10,000 hours, and I'm thinking to myself, it's impossible for you to do drills for 10,000 hours. I mean, you got to be an athlete maybe for 10,000 hours, and that can be playing soccer or go out shooting hoops or getting your 10,000 hours or your athleticism different ways. It's not all sitting on having a coach and running drills for 10,000 hours. Those kids never make it. Never.
What was your first year as a scout for the Buffalo Sabres like? What did it change? I guess I'm curious.
Well, we went to the finals that year.
Yes,
it was a pretty good year.
I was gonna bring that up, and then I'm like, we'll see.
We had Hasek.
You had this guy named Dominic Hasek. Yeah, he was pretty good.
We, I mean, I learned a lot. It was good. Like we were a small market team back then. You had big markets and small markets. We were a small market team, and then we got a role in playoffs, and Dominic Hasek was just lights out. And I think we won the first game in Dallas. We lost the second. We won the third. Like, that team was all of a sudden, it just hit its stride at the right time. And of course, game 6, the no goal. And if we would have scored, I was there at that game. We hit 2 or 3 posts that if they just went in, Dallas was an old Hall and all those guys. They were old and they were beat up, and I don't think they had much left. That if we could have won that game, I think we win the cup. So it was a pretty good start to my start of my scouting. And then I was there 8 years. Then we went downhill, and then the year I left was the year Jim Benning left and Don Luce left. Terry Martin left. Was the year, I think, 04-05. We came out of that lockout and we won the President's Cup. And we lost to Carolina in the semifinals, Game 7, and then Carolina beat Edmonton. And that was about that time period. So that was, we rode that from the Cup down, all the way down to, I think we picked 4 or 5 for a couple of years. And then we had guys like Derek Roy and all these guys, Palmanville, hit their stride, and we were back up at won the President's Cup that year. Curious,
being from Lloyd, if you had any hand in Clark MacArthur heading towards Buffalo.
Yeah, Clark's it was, I don't know if Clark knows he wasn't going to get drafted by us. We were going to take Carcillo. We needed I think it was Carcillo. We decided we needed a tough guy in the 3rd round, and who's this guy? This Carcillo. I think it was Carcillo. Pittsburgh took him right before us. So we're sitting there, and I said, well, the next guy on our list, and I said, we have to take him, is Clark MacArthur. And Jim Benning was from Portland, seen Clark play a lot. And so we drafted Clark. Clark wasn't very big back then. I'd watched Clark. I think my wife and I went to the under-16s in Calgary, and Clark was there. And maybe it was the under-15s. And I knew who Clark was, so I watched him. He's a really skilled player. The following year, we were living in Sylvan Lake, and Clark was playing as a 16-year-old in Drayton Valley. And so I went and watched him one night. I drove to Drayton Valley and watched Clark play, and he was taking the old 2-minute shifts, and I'm going about half speed. His 17-year-old year, he went to Medicine Hat. His shift length was probably down to about 1 minute and 45 seconds. I think that year he might have been minus 30. He was a minus player. But you could see the talent and the skill of Clark. We drafted Clark. I went to, after the draft, about a week later, I went to his house and talked to his mom and dad and Clark at the kitchen table. I said, Clark, one thing you're going to have to learn how to do is work. And if you never learn how to work and never learn how to compete, I said, I know my GM will never sign you. He won't even give you a chance. And so Clark, I didn't know how Clark was going to react. Clark, as an 18-year-old and as a 19-year-old, was the hardest working guy on the ice every night. He would last 40 seconds, and it was almost like somebody pulled out the power pack in his back. He could barely get off the ice. He was such a competitive, hard-working, player, and then he ended up making the World Junior team.
Yeah.
But
we all remember that team.
Clark listened, and Clark played a lot of years and made a lot of money, being smart, being skilled, but being competitive. And we talk a lot now open and closed mindsets, and Clark had an open mindset. If Clark was a closed mindset, he wouldn't have done it. We dig into a lot of the players now is how open is their mind to learning how to change and develop and change what they're doing to be a better player. And Clark was definitely an open mindset person, and he had a good career. He was outstanding. That was one of my favorite picks of Ryan Miller. The years collide. Ryan Miller might have been a different year, but we got Ryan Miller in the 4th or 5th round. We got Clark in the 3rd. Like those were good picks for us. And yeah, every once in a while I see his mom and dad, and again, good family.
Yeah, great people.
Good people. Those are the kids that you just, if you can. At the time, we didn't do that kind of in depth. I knew of the Clark and his mom and dad, and I knew they were good people, that there wasn't going to be a problem, but we didn't dig into it like we do now. But we hit a home run with Clark. That's for sure. He was a great player. If kids worked that hard, they'd have a lot of success. He was so impressive to watch as an 18 or 19-year-old. And he had good teams in Medicine Hat. It helped. He had a good coach in Willie, and they had good teams, and yeah, the first camp we had in St. Catharines, tiny little rink in St. Catharines. And his first camp, you kind of, everybody watches, and you kind of say, well, who impressed you today? Who's going to make it? Who's your favorite young guy? I said, Clark McCarthy's playing, man. He's too good. So it was good. He was a special guy.
Not why. What was it like going from the Buffalo Sabres to the Pittsburgh Penguins? You have the Buffalo Sabres, who had gone when you first start, making the Stanley Cup Finals, coming within an inch or less, or with a hair, of winning Stanley Cup, to going to, for the 2 years you were in Pittsburgh. I think it's a year after you leave they win, but your last year there, they go to a Cup Final against Detroit. They were like right on the cusp. That is Crosby at the time, his best. I mean, you can argue any of the years, but at that time, they were young, talented.
They were good. I got the opportunity because they were so bad, and Ray Shero got the job, and I ended up going to Pittsburgh. The most impressive part about Crosby was, I think he'd have been about 19 at the time, and I remember somebody asking me, is it worth bringing in the young kids to camp, like our drafted kids? I said, are you kidding me? Just the visual of our kids walking in. We had at that time Tyler Kennedy and a bunch of kids that come in, and to see what Sidney Crosby looked at 19. I mean, how his body was put together, and the amount of hours and that he put into his body, it was worth all those kids coming and seeing that person. I mean, he'd have been probably 210 pounds at the time, and he's 19 years old, and he's just a phenom. The kids that the lesson was, you put the work in, you get the results. So the second year, we had a good team, and they traded for Hossa, I think, that year, and we had a good team, and of course, we ended up losing to the
Detroit Red Wings. Yeah,
and then Hossa switched teams.
Correct.
And then Pittsburgh beat him the following year. Yeah, I've had three cracks at the cup, and I missed on all of them. That one was just I left a year too early.
As scouts of your team when you're in the Stanley Cup Finals, because you're closing in on what I assume is the biggest day each year of your guys' job, the draft.
Yeah.
How much are you involved watching the games, and how much you're just like, I gotta be, because at that time you got for junior and specifically you got all the major junior championships going on. You got the Memorial Cup, you got the Royal Bank Cup, you got
obviously the draft and all that, the preparation is your job. Stanley Cup run is just. You have nothing to do with it.
Yes,
you're there
absolutely.
you're actually there to watch and be part of it, and you hope your organization values the scouts enough to bring them in, because that doesn't happen everywhere. But in Pittsburgh, it was they treated us unreal. So yeah, at that point you're just there, and even in Tampa when we went against Chicago, you're just there to be part of it. Hang on and just watch, and if you lose, it's pretty depressing. If you win, it's pretty exciting. It's just the whole atmosphere, like you're involved in the intensity of that is incredible.
Why make the switch then from Pittsburgh to Tampa?
The biggest thing was I took over their scouting, so I was the head scout when Orrin Koulis and Lenny Barry took over. They were looking for a head scout, and that was the main reason. At the time, Tampa was last, so it was a good chance to build a hockey team and get involved in the ground level. And
you guys have done a fantastic job of scouting.
Yeah, we've had some luck. Braden Point in the third round.
Yeah.
That was a lucky pick.
Well, I'm going to run you through the first 7 years I'm there, because I was looking at it today, because around here, well, not around here, I just look at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's been a fantastic team to watch for the last decade. I think when I looked it up, Edmonton is dead last in wins in the last 10 years. The only team below them is Vegas, and we understand why.
Yeah.
And Tampa Bay is top 7, and you're like, 10 wins away from being number 1, and the top team is Pittsburgh. But the year you go there, you guys obviously get first overall pick, which turns into Steven Stamkos. The second year, you get Victor Hedman, second overall. And then Panik, who plays a bunch of games for you, 52nd. In 2010, you had Brett Connolly and Gudas, which neither one are currently, but those guys have both played meaningful games in the NHL. And I might be missing guys. By all means, you can chime in. In 2011, you had Nemestikov.
Yep.
But the big one is Kucherov in the second round at 58.
Yeah.
Platt at 208 in the seventh round. And a guy that I've liked watching the last few years is Johnson. Tyler Johnson. He was undrafted.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a good signing for us.
2012, you had Vasilevsky and Paquette. Paquette was 101, fourth round. In 2013, you had Duran, who once Sergachev. 2014, you had Point in the third round. And 2015, you had Cirelli in the third round. That's your team right now.
Yeah, when you're in the moment, though, you're like, it's easy to go back and look at the mistakes, because we made some mistakes. I think I've seen stuff where we've got the most kids playing like that we drafted, which it means something. You still want quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Like Braden Point in the third round was, it's pure luck. If we would have thought he was Braden Point of what we say today, we'd have taken him with our first pick. Cirelli is another one. Cirelli's a great story. He was undrafted in the OHL, walked on to Oshawa at the beginning of the year. That was the year they won the Memorial Cup, and he scored 2 or 3 goals, and that was where we saw him. We're like, wow, we got to draft this guy. So he goes from 7 months earlier, just hoping to make the Oshawa Generals team, to winning the Memorial Cup, and I think he scored the winning goal, to getting drafted by us, and now he's a huge part of our team. Those types of picks are what make your draft, or what make your team good, because you got to think everybody gets a good player every year. Your first pick should play.
Should be, yeah.
I think the numbers are not every player. I think the criteria was at least 100 games or 200 games. They're after the third round, only 10%. So 3 kids at each round play. Third round is about I want to say 15%. I think the second round, 26%, and the first round is probably 60-some% of those kids play. So you need a little bit of luck, and for our staff to say that we knew Braden Point was going to be great. I knew the next year we had a great player. To say Sorelli was going to be a great player. I knew probably 2 years later that we had a good player. We also drafted that year Joseph out of Santa. He's been up and down. So we've been lucky in some of the ways. We do. I don't know how the other staffs do their scouting. We have a certain way that we do our scouting, and that myself and Al Murray do all the crossovers. We go around the world watching the players, and everybody else stays in their area or their league and just knows their guys. And more and more teams are doing it that way. And our biggest thing was to just do a flyby and have 8 guys around the world just seeing the top guys. And well, you only get a couple cracks at the top guys anyway. And if you do a flyby by watching the Moose Jaw Warriors and you miss Braden Point because he's only going to be a 3rd round pick, you miss those guys. So the way we've done it is I think it's really helped the way we've been able to add players, that we get the Palats in the 7th round and we get the Braden Points in the 3rd round, and it's definitely helped.
You get Tyler Johnson undrafted.
Tyler Johnson undrafted that year. We that same year our big year was the same year. Palat was a 19-year-old we took in the last round. Tyler Johnson was a free agent signing, and we signed another kid. He's playing our minors now. We traded him for Bishop. We signed him out of college, and he got off to a great start with us. Was playing with Vinny and Marty St. Louis, and probably in his first 25 games he might have had 20 points. And Steve shipped him to Ottawa for Bishop, and that kind of got the whole ball rolling. Where we had a goalie, we had these young guys coming in. And that's another thing. We've never been afraid to take older kids. Gudis was a 19-year-old. Platt was a 19-year-old. We've never been afraid to draft an older kid, just because he's a little bit older. We found that kids arrive at different stages at different times in their lives, whether they grow late or get a chance late or get stronger late. If they're a good player, they're a good player. So we've never said, well, he's 19, we're not going to draft him. We've always said, well, if he's 19 and he's a good player, let's jump on him right now. And that's why we drafted Gudis in the 3rd. Just different guys that we're not afraid to jump right in and with 2 feet and take a crack at him.
What was it like showing up to work and having Stevie Y around?
Steve's a real good guy, real nice guy. He's super intense. He's a bit intimidating in that he intimidates. He's an incredible hard worker. So when he's talking, you know that he knows his stuff. I look at Steve, and he's a huge soccer guy. He loves Liverpool, and if I'm convinced if Steve was living in England, he'd be a superstar soccer player. I think whatever he wants to do, whatever he puts his mind to, he's got the character and the athleticism and the willpower to be the best. So that's one thing, getting to know these types of guys. You see them on the ice, and then you meet them, and right away you can tell he was going to be successful. There was no ifs, ands, or buts or gray area with a guy like Steve, and that's Steve or whoever superstars are. They hit because they're great. They're great people, and they're great motivators. Like, they can motivate themselves, and they're great character. They don't miss. The tough part for our job is to figure that out when they're 17. That's the hardest part, is to say, wow, this guy's gonna be a star because he's this, and you're looking at a 17-year-old kid. Braden Point wasn't a great skater, so I think teams at the time, everybody was trying to get a little bigger, including us. Everybody wanted to get a little bigger. Here's Braden Point at 5'8", not a great skater, really smart. So Braden Point, we had Barbara Underhill go in and start working with the skating, and what she said, the kid is relentless. He works every day on his skating. So at the time, we knew Braden Point was a great player because he was a great player, but we didn't know he had that kind of character, the will to be the best player. and the work ethic and the time those guys put into their jobs. They're professionals, is what they are.
How about the actual draft day? What is that experience like? Now you've been a part of it for
20 years.
20 years. For all of us fans sitting on the outside looking at the draft floor, what is that experience like?
When you're picking 15 to late in the first, there's not a lot of pressure. You want to get a really good player. I've had the fortunate or unfortunate scenarios of picking early, and it's Hedman was pretty easy. Drouin at the time wasn't as easy because we had Jones was still available. So there's the pressure of getting the best player, and he's got to be a good player. Like some years you can be picking number one, and that number one is just an okay player. Some years that number one's a superstar. So ownership and fans, they all expect this guy to be a really good player, and some years the quality isn't there. So the stress is picking high. Picking a top 10 is stressful, really stressful. Like it's like because things happen that you didn't know, and again, they're 17-year-old boys, and you still aren't 100% sold on their character because all of a sudden now they're millionaires. And I tell people it's like if you won the $50 million lottery on Friday, does that person change or not change? And it's pretty much that's where character and you can pay Sidney Crosby as much money as there is out there, and he won't change. Whereas the next guy, and there's lots of them in the National Hockey League, they get the payday, and for the next 3 years they can't play. They just mentally aren't the same. So to find those guys is that's the hardest part.
Well, that's the challenge of your job.
That's the challenge.
That's probably the exciting part.
And it's the unknown.
Yeah.
Because you really don't know. You like to think he's going to be the same guy you're watching, but there's no guarantees. Some guy, I've been doing the junior stuff. There's some kids that I thought there's no way he'll ever change, and they changed. And then there's guys that I thought, wow, this guy's never going to play because he's such a flake, and wait, just give him a little bit of money, look out, and those guys have changed. It doesn't happen very often, but there's guys that I didn't think had the character or the toughness to.
Who's the biggest surprise you think when you look back on it as a guy that you thought, maybe he'll make it, and then all of a sudden he's in? And
well, there's lots of those guys that there's always, let's say you take 100 kids, there's 10 that you know we're going to play. Then there's probably 30 that you're like, these guys got good chances, they got to grow. Then there's a whole bunch of gray, and you're laying your bet on something you saw him play that night, or you saw him on a weekend and he showed you something, or he's just hit puberty a year ago. Like there's something that you're going to lay your chip on because you think he has a chance to develop further, and that's where you get your Sorellis and your Braden Points and the Gudises, and every team has them. I was just talking about ours, but there's kids that I didn't think would ever play, and like they're good players. And they grew and they developed, and they got lucky. They're in the right situation with the right coach who played them and developed them. I remember watching Sutter. I think it's the Sutter that plays in Vancouver.
Is it Brandon?
Brandon. And obviously his dad coached him in Red Deer. Well, they brought him in as a 15-year-old after his midgets were done, and I'm looking at him like, this guy doesn't belong on the ice. He does not belong. He's too small. He's too weak. But his dad coached and just kept throwing him out there. His 16-year-old year was a little bit better. Well, he had his dad. He got the ice time because of his dad, and by his 17-year-old year, like, holy smokes, this guy's going to be a good player. And he's going to play 15 years in the National Hockey League. So if you get at the right spot, the right time, you have the right mentality, and you have a coach that teaches you something, you got a good chance. You got a better chance.
Well, I'll put us to our final segment. It's the Final Five by Crude Master and Transport. Shout out to Heath and Tracy McDonald. They help support this from the beginning. So it's 5 questions, long, short, as you want. But in a given year, how many rinks do you go to?
A couple hundred, maybe 250.
How many countries is that in?
I'd say 7 or 8 different countries a year. It depends if the World Juniors are obviously in Canada or in Europe. Our year starts off in Ivan Holinka's in Czech and Slovak. I usually go for sure to Sweden and Finland. This year I went to Germany, Russia, U.S., Canada. Those are probably the big ones right there.
When you go to all these different places, areas, is it like just like noticeable how they treat the game? Right? I always think the West always used to be big, physical, Saskatchewan in particular, and then if you went out east, it was small and quicker, and maybe that's completely off on
yeah,
it.
every country's a little different. Finland's one of my favorites because they still are. It's hard, like it's a tough environment. The kids, Sweden's always considered I would say the Swedes look down on the Finns. Sweden's kind of upper class. Finland's kind of a lot of middle class kids, and it kind of shows the way they play. Russia is just every country's just a chance to get out of Russia. It's corrupt. Switzerland would be high end wealth. Germany is those kids that are coming out lately have been. I like Germany. Germany's like a real cool country. So every country is a little bit different, and the kids are a little different too. The Swedes are very skilled and proper. And they come to our meetings and they're dressed immaculate, and the Finnish kid might be a little more messy. Like he's not quite dressed as well. He's just, and you like that kid. You're like, wow, this guy's a tough guy. Like, so it kind of depends on their lifestyles. It kind of how it all. You like to think that's the way the kid's going to develop.
Looking back on your career so far, is there one place you went and you just kind of walked in thinking, I'm going to catch a game, and then there was a kid that caught your eye?
Not really. Not really. Usually, the events I go to, kind of, they've been pre-scouted.
Pre-scouted.
And there's always guys that come out of nowhere, like Scheifele. His year, you didn't even know who Scheifele was until Christmas, because he wasn't that good until Christmas. And then the last 6 weeks of the year, you're trying to catch every game because you're like, how good can this guy get to be? And he ends up going to Winnipeg in the real high in the draft. And the funny thing was, his line mate's a kid named Pearson. So Scheifele the following year plays his 10 games with Winnipeg, and this Pearson all of a sudden in Barrie takes off and is leading the league in scoring. So I'm flipping back through, and I was at games. I looked at where our scouts reports. Nobody had a report on this guy, but we weren't the only team. Every team was the same. He's playing with Scheifele, and all of a sudden it's his turn, and he ended up by the end of the year being a first round. He made the World Junior team as a 19-year-old, and he's a first rounder to LA. I mean, for 2 years we could have had him for nothing. So I say this to all the kids: just keep going, keep getting better, because when it hits, you go to a rink sometimes and you're like, wow, is this guy good? And then all of a sudden he goes from not even a draft to like Scheifele. Everybody's climbing all over trying to get him in the first round, and that happened in 2.5 months. And it probably happens. I bet you that happens once a year. There's a kid that you're just like, wow, is he good? Is he good?
Yeah, and where did he come from?
Yeah, and we have vague reports on him. We haven't really watched him, but that's not just our group. It's been Central Scouting. It's been everybody. So every year there's a guy.
What do you do? I don't know when your off season is, but when it is, what do you do to get away from hockey?
Well, not too much, because then my wife and I start running camps in Halifax, which is, for me, is therapeutic. I get to go on, and it's not even my kids on the ice. It's getting more and more my kids aren't on the ice, but it's so much fun to grab 16, 18 kids and just help them. So starting, I'm done in June, starting the next week in July through August, usually I'm on the ice 3 hours a day, just doing that kind of stuff. And I talk to different guys that do it, ex-players and stuff, and for them it's the same. It's just it's fun to be on the ice. It's fun to talk hockey with kids, and it's super fun to watch them take it in and after a week get better. So really I don't get away from it. The only way I get away from it is I tend not to watch a lot of hockey on TV as far as the NHL. Like sometimes it's just too much. I just
If you were flipping the TV and you couldn't pick hockey and you had to pick a sport, what would you flip to? What do you like watching?
Sport?
Yeah. Or
I've gotten to really enjoy soccer. Champions League's out whenever I go there in the springtime. The Champions League's on, so to watch Barcelona, watch Messi, and watch those guys.
Do you go to any games?
No, I haven't. I'd like to do that one year I'm over there. Is just fly to Barcelona and go to a game. To me, those guys are the elite athletes. Like, they're special. I know different people say it's boring and stuff. If you watch a guy like Messi or Ronaldo, like, those guys they're different human beings.
How so? Because you get to watch elite athletes all the time.
They're just it's the biggest sport in the world. So to be the best at that level is like, there's probably 1 billion people playing soccer.
True. Probably 3 billion people playing soccer.
To be the best of that is those guys. Like, I watch Messi, and he does stuff with the ball, and his competitiveness and his will to score goals it's incredible. So you go to Europe. Usually the under 18s are in Europe. You know, at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, you go to a game, you go to a bar and start watching that. And the atmosphere of soccer over there it's second to none. It's incredible. We think hockey is big. Soccer, it's fanatical over there. So it's fun to be involved in watching that sport for me. And even my kids growing up all played soccer. And I told all of them, you can quit hockey any day, because I enjoyed watching them play soccer. It was fun to watch them play soccer. And I know a lot of people, Canadians, are like, well, it's boring, there's no goals. But if you actually watch the game and how you're supposed to play, how good coaches coach the game, it's a lot like hockey. It's triangulation, and it's anticipation, and it's athleticism. That's good.
If you could go for coffee with one person, or beer or beverage, whatever your beverage of choice is, current, past, superstar, hole in the wall, no matter who would you go with?
I've enjoyed my time, getting involved with Steve. There's usually, the entourage is pretty cool. You get to meet Steve Thomas and Pat Verbeek and to go out for a meeting or a meal or a beer with those guys. It's pretty cool. Like, they're such good guys. It's not it's not intimidating. It's just they talk. You can tell all their lives they've been in hockey, and the way they normalize the game, the way they look at the game, the way they talk about ex-players or situations. It's kind of neat to and they've all been Stanley Cup champions. Pat was with Dallas, so they've all. You can tell why they're successful. It's cool to be around successful people, whether you're a business guy or you've built a business from scratch, been a hockey guy. Like, those guys, a lot of them are the same. The guy that built an oil company from nothing, or a trucking company, like, something drove them to be the best. And hockey's no different. So those guys are cool. Those guys are neat to be around.
Final one. If you look back so far, what's the one kid you missed? And I'm sure you could say that, but is there one that sticks out where you go?
We were going to take Pashanuk a couple of years ago, and we had 2 picks that year, and we took Tony DeLangelo with our first. Again, we needed a defenseman. He was a power play guy. We were excited to have him. And we'd gotten to the point where we've taken a kid named Cuckoo, Brett Conley, and they were injured. So we decided not to take any more injured players that we couldn't afford. And Pashanuk that year, about January, hurt his back. And of course, the doctors, they all say, well, there could be down the road, there could be some disc problems and blah, blah,
He's
blah.
pretty good.
And that's the one guy that, looking back, that I wish we would have switched it around and taken Pashnuk first and then had a crack at Tony DeAngelo. If we had Pashnuk now, and he was special to go, he was fun to go watch. I watched him. He was playing in the Swedish second league, Allsvenskan, and he was just 17. And you go watch him play, and he's the best player on the ice. And I remember reading my reports, like, the Allsvenskan is like the minor league level in Sweden. So they get the second tier of guy that, and I remember writing my reports that nobody can play with this guy. Nobody's ready for the puck. So that's the one guy that, and there's a lot, every year you wish you could redo it. But he's definitely one of them that we could have had. And looking back, about 3 years later, we're like, shit, we should have taken that kid. But impossible at that time, but I watch him every night, and I watched him last night, like just the stuff he can do.
Yeah.
And the toughness.
He's a phenomenal player.
The toughness he has, and the willing to go into tough areas to score goals, and those guys, he's probably been the one.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming in. I won't hold you any longer. We just hit the 2-hour mark, so you're probably itching to get visiting some family, that kind of thing. But really appreciate you stopping through, sitting down with us. I've been having a ton of fun. This has been a lot of fun for me to sit and listen to your stories. So I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thanks again.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was fun to rehash some of the stuff for sure. Thanks.
Cool.